Okay, so please take your seats. Turn on recording. All right. Okay, so I just want to show you a nice tool that you can use to actually test this accessibility. And then after that, we'll go into some more detail on the device independence and responsive web design. That will probably not take 45 minutes. So now that I've promised you, I should probably agree to that. Okay, so this is a nice tool. It's called Wave, and it's an evaluation tool. So it's a way of assessing web pages according to these guidelines of the WCAG. All right, so it actually talks about the same guidelines. And it's a web tool. It's made by WebAIM, and it's a group that's closely coordinating with this W3C to build this tool to make sure that it matches these guidelines. So let's have a look. So this is the website. You can just add a URL here. So let's go for food because we want to eat our own dog food. So maybe just have how many of you have already seen how many errors there are? No, okay, so then we can make it a quiz. So how many of you think that there are no errors? Okay. Who of you thinks that there are between 1 and 10 errors? Okay, thank you. Good. Believe in your universe. Very good. And who of you thinks that there are between 10 and 50 errors? Okay, and thank you. How many of you think there are between 50 and infinity errors? Okay, shame on you. So not that bad. Okay, let's see. Okay, so it's processing. It's now going through the website, taking all the links and determining whether they adhere to these guidelines. Right, and so it's bad, but it's not that bad, guys. So let's see if I. 1 second. Right, so it says here there are 21 errors. So that's pretty. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Thank you. 21 errors, and I have to accept the cookie. Okay. So I think after accepting the cookie, there's still 21 errors. Yes. So there's 21 errors. We can have a quick look at those. But there's also alerts and features, and it gives you some more feedback on the content of the site. So this is not good. So let's have a look. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. Right, so it makes this quite horrible page even more horrible. So for example, here you see a red dot, and it says, well, there's a form actually there, but there's no label to the form. So the screen reader would not know what to make of this. There's a button which is apparently empty. There's a form label that's empty. If you scroll down a bit, here we see another red one. So there's a linked image where there's no alternative text. So the screen reader has no idea what to make of this image that might be important because there's a link. Again, image without alternative text. So actually the majority of these errors are of this type 1.1.1. Right? So visual elements without textual alternatives, therefore unusable by screen readers, for example. There's also all kinds of alerts. So you can actually use this in a positive way if you want to redesign your website. So, there's here 2 links that actually go to the same URL. So that might be you fixing a bug in your code, or it might be just bad design. Let's have another one. Right, so again, here there's a link without an alt text. Right, so this is about this nice image about these 2 professors who won a prize. So we can actually see the professors. But if we don't see professors, then there's a magical black box image there, and there might be anything. Anything can be on this page. So for a screen reader, we can't see it. So obviously, if you do have a screen reader, you can also not see it, but at least you know that there's actually a photograph of these 2 people holding up some magical device. Right, so it's a nice tool, both to shame your university, but also to increase your compliance of your own, the compliance of your own stuff. Right? So it might be a helpful tip for your assignment 1 as well, or assignment 1. Okay, so that's the WebAIM one. Right, so this is in case the live demo didn't work. Right, and the WebAIM groups actually gives you also these ideas on how you can actually improve that. So again, this is the WCAG working group recommendations, but presented in a more readable way. Okay, so that's it for me about web accessibility. But actually, most of the themes will continue in the second part, which is the idea of device independence. Right, this is something that's more common. Any good web designer will tell his or her clients that yes, they do device independent design and they do responsive web design, so you can safely hand over your money. And so why is this important? So, like I said, we've been doing this course for a long time, and a few years ago, the predominant way in which people were using the web was through desktop screens, right, or laptops. So basically, they're more or less, from a user perspective, the same thing, right? So this is this dark blue dot. Let's say 10 years ago, was the majority of users was using the web in this way, and mobile web was not really either not existent or it was a horrible form with WAP protocols and things that really didn't work. Right, so there was no mobile web, and of course, we all know that the mobile web is becoming more and more dominant. And actually, it depends a bit on what you're measuring, but you can say that in the last few years, mobile has become the default way in which people access web information, with desktop being second. Right? So this changed the way that we think people interact with the web, and it changed the way that in which designers design web pages. So a lot of designers now go for mobile first. Mobile first, which means I first think about the majority of users and then build the desktop. Yes?
Yes, in the graph ComScore, are laptops considered desktops or mobile?
Yes, our laptops are considered desktops because they have the same widescreen layout, which might be larger or smaller than desktops, but they're essentially the same type of device. So in this case, desktop is not a good name. It's a large screen device or something like that. Of course, mobile also can mean different things, right? It can mean iPads, iPhones, super tiny smartphones, I don't know. And now we have smartwatches, which are not even on this graph. Right, so there's all kinds of other graphs that basically show the same thing. So don't quote me on the numbers, but this is also, you can measure it, but it's also a feeling that we have. I think we are using the web more and more also on our mobiles. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that there's less desktop use. Right? There's just more mobile use. If you look at the desktop use, this blue line is more or less the same. Right? So people are still using that. They're just using more and more mobile as well. So that means that there's no sort of, we didn't first have websites on desktops and now we all have to do everything in mobile. No, actually we now have an ecosystem in which there's different types of devices with which people use the web, right? So now just go back 2 slides. This is sort of, like you have the iPad type thing, you have laptops, you have larger laptops, smaller laptops, you have large screens, you have insanely large screens now, you have people with setups of 3 screens, or large HD beamers, right? So there's a whole ecosystem of devices with which people use the web, and we can't assume a standard setup of 640 by 320 monitors, which is what people used to do, let's say 15 years ago. Okay, so just as with accessibility guidelines, there's also principles of device independence that are discussed within the W3C working group. So again, this is the people governing the web, so you think about how should we think about this problem or about this challenge, and what can we do to standardize some of these solutions. So you can have a look at that. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to show you the 3 ways in which you can look at device independence. So these are sort of frames of reference in which we can look at this problem. So the first one is the user perspective. So this is, what does device independence mean from a user perspective? It means that there's some content on the World Wide Web, and I'm a user, and I have all kinds of ways of perceiving and interacting with content, and I have some access mechanism which allows me to do this. Right? So if I look at it from a user perspective, that's all I care about. I just want to be able to deal with the content, the same content, through a number of different devices, right? So for something to be device independent, it means that I should get a functional user experience via any access mechanism. And again, this is sort of an ideal world, so of course we can't do it for everything, but you can at least strive towards this. Right? So in more detail, it says that a web page identifier, so a URL that provides a functional user experience via one access mechanism, so for a mobile site, should also provide a user experience of equivalent functionality via any other mechanism. So it's basically rephrasing the same thing. And here again, it's not the same, but it's equivalent. So it might be slightly different. So this, you see here how that would relate also to the screen reader, right? Which is just another device. Right? So this is how the two are closely connected. Okay, so there's also the authoring perspective. So how can we actually make this work? Right? So we have the web, and then we have a web page identifier. And on the server side, so jumping ahead to assignment 3, where you're going to look at web servers and how they actually provide content. On the server side, you can actually change the form that the content is delivered by knowing what the application, the delivery unit, what is requested from the web, and actually have adaptation rules that slightly change the form that the content is provided in to adhere to the wishes of this device, and through that the user. Right? So it should be possible to provide a functional user experience in response to a request from a web page in any given delivery context. So delivery context means the device plus the user plus any contextual information that might be needed to change the results. Right? So this means that I need to have enough information about the access mechanism, so the device, which is the context, to enable appropriate user experience. So that means that the technology needs to be able to somehow tell the server what type of thing it's accessing. Right? And HTTP, for example, allows for these type of context information. So this, you can see that from the noble idea that we should have this universal access and device independence, we actually also need to have technology that's able to deal with it. So we need to have some information going that way. Right? So again, this is built on top of IP and TCP, and using HTTP, we can actually just add layers that we can use to send this information back and forth. Okay, and then finally, sorry, that's the delivery perspective. Right, so I have here the user, so I interact and perceive through my device. So this can be a mobile phone, or it can be a desktop, or it can be a screen reader, or some other cool thing. And in this case, I should be able to use client-side adaptation. That's also a possibility to actually change the content that's incoming from the web and render it in a smart way. Right? So some of this stuff will be done server-side, and some of the stuff can be done client-side through the device. Right? The device can say, well, I know I have a small screen, so I'll just try to fit it in the small screen that you have. Right? Depending on the context. And here you can actually have a lot of personal adaptation as well. Right? So if your device knows a lot about you, and therefore you can actually, it can be used to render it in a different way that makes sense to you. For example, you always like a pink background. Okay, so then you can possibly change that pink background. Okay, so these are the three different perspectives, frameworks in which you can look at device dependence. So the user perspective, the authoring perspective, and the delivery perspective. So this is what this document from the WWDC talks about. Okay, so this is related to the idea of responsive web design. So again, the third term, so web accessibility, device independent, and responsive. So responsive web design makes your web page look good on all devices. So this is basically conforming to this notion of device independence. And this is a hype term, I would say. Responsive web design is about using the technologies at hand to resize and shrink the thing so that it fits in your screen. So it's a bit of a sort of restricted view on the same principles. So you can look at this nice page from the W3 Schools, which is a nice page with all kinds of tutorials on how to make sure that your web page is responsive, so that it actually shrinks in the right way. So I just show you this sort of marketing thing. So it's from a web design company. and you can actually see what they offer you.
Right now you're probably wondering, what is the responsive design? Well, in today's world, internet is one of the most important forms of media, and the internet's mostly consumed using desktop computers, right? But wait, how about mobile devices, smartphones, and tablets? The share of internet usage on these devices is growing every day. In 2011, mobile browsing took a share of about 11%. Last year, it was near to 25%, and the prediction says that this year, it can actually overtake the traditional desktop browsing. So what do all these numbers mean to you? Well, it means that if you don't want to lose any potential clients, then you need a great-looking website, which is also optimized for mobile browsing. Because the problem of many current websites is that the user experience on mobile devices is, well, how do I put it? Terrible. And that's a mission for responsive design. Responsive websites respond to the screen size of the device you're viewing it on. So instead of creating different websites for different devices, your responsive website rearranges the elements to fit any screen. So you'll get more happy visitors, which also leads to more happy customers. Interested in responsive design? Want one of those responsive websites for your business? Well, that's something we can definitely help you with. Contact us today.
So yeah, contact them. Right, so what I want to show you is that this makes sense from again, this is not just because I tell you that your site has to be responsive. No, it's because you want to reach your clients, right? Again, think about one of the reasons to do this, not just legal reasons, just because you want to reach your clients, and your clients have mobile phones, and they have tablets, and they have screen readers, and they have puff switches. So make sure that your stuff works for them as well. Okay, so just going into a very concrete question, yeah?
Yeah, I want to note down the YouTube link, but you skipped it a little bit fast.
Yes. I think it's just if you Google responsive design explained, you should get it.
Okay.
I think that's why how I found it.
Great.
Okay, so very concrete things because like I said, we are going to step a bit back today. Right? We talked a bit about the tags that you have been shown in the second lecture. But I also want to show you that all this stuff is actually doable using these standard web technologies, right? So how do you actually do it? Well, you instead of telling the website how many pixels something, broad something should be, right? Which will render a completely different result in all kinds of different devices because those have different resolutions. What you can do is have fluid grids, right? So percentage width rather than pixel width. Right? So this is sort of a good design because that means that if you turn around your screen, then suddenly your screen becomes the resolution becomes flipped, and that means that suddenly you can actually use the full width of the screen or vice versa. Right, so you can do that with percentages. You have to do a bit of calculation. You can say, well, I want to have it this broad, so I still want to have the same view, but I now want to have it in percentages. You can also do it with images, so the same thing holds. So you can actually use CSS to change how much real estate your image should take up. So that's quite nice. So all these things are also in subsequent versions of HTML and CSS were implemented. And one nice thing is you can use media queries, which is a feature of CSS, where you can actually take the context, right? So the information that you have from the requesting device, and do a sort of if-then statement based on this on what this context looks like. So you can say, well, if I am on a screen, right? So someone's looking at the screen, and the minimum width of the screen is 600 pixels, then everything between these brackets holds. So all the CSS markup holds, that's here. And then if it's even larger, then all of this other stuff holds, right? So that means that you can sort of switch between these things. And you can have screen here, but you can also have print here, right? So if someone decides to print it, then get rid of all these ads, for example. Right, so this is a technical way in which you can solve some of these responsive design principles.
What do you mean exactly by fluid grids? Is it like a CSS grid using, is it Flexbox, is it
yeah, so what I mean with so typically web design and it talks about grids. talks about layout in terms of grid, so I want to have this here and then that here. So this is the way that a lot of websites are built up. So that's the notion of grids.
There are so many different ways to talk about the grid now, so I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, so I'm just talking about it from the perspective of a visual designer that thinks usually in grids. And what you can do is in CSS or in HTML, you can just say, well, it starts here at 0.0 and it continues to 0.50, right, which is a pixel width. But in this case, you can actually also have those fluids. So the relative size of the grid is, or the layout of the grid is the same if you use percentages, but it is actually larger or smaller depending on the size of the screen. Doesn't answer your question, I think.
I'll come to you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is just a way that actually becomes responsive. If you turn your screen, then this percentage will actually change the number of pixels that is taken up. Okay. So responsive and device independence take home. So responsive web design makes your website look good on all devices or all kinds of devices. And it's not about magic, it's about really using the standards again to resize, hide, and shrink and enlarge it so that it matches the screen real estate. So this is a subset of device independence and web accessibility. Right, and like I said, so now people are thinking, so what designers now say is they do mobile first design. This is a feature that you can find on web pages of web designers, which means that they don't assume that this desktopness. Of course, you can also do it. You can also fold the other way around. You can also go too far in your mobile first design and then forget about the desktop, right? So again, thinking about all devices here is key. Okay, so that's it about web accessibility and responsiveness, responsive design. So I just want to wrap up here and then use 5 minutes to point ahead a bit to another topic that's very related. But first, I have a question.
So I think it was from the start of last year, or start of the year before, Google's SEO ranking started punishing you if you didn't have mobile design baked into your site.
Right. Yeah. So companies like Google are also. I mean, the way in which websites adhere to these standards also helps them in ranking them. So indeed, they are now also punishing websites that do not adhere to some of these device independence principles. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So they do this type of analysis that this tool does as well, but they do it in secret hidden way, of course. Yeah.
Do you think it's better like to start from design mobile first, like you just said, then adjust it to desktop screen or?
Yeah. So the question is it better to start screen first or mobile first, or right? So the answer is I'm not a designer, so I don't know. I would say that it's always good to first think about your content, so do interaction design or content design, and then think about the different ways in which your user is using it, and then sort of do a parallel design where you can start with mobile first or the screen first, but always taking these device independence principles in mind. So it's a bit of a cop-out answer, I agree, but I mean, what people have been doing this with web design for a long time, but with different browsers, right? So anytime someone makes a website, he or she is sure to always, every week, check it with all different browsers, because you're sure that Chrome will do a slight change, and then suddenly your nice box is not aligned. So just as you have with browsers, you should also test it on the mobile and then on the screen. And as soon as something doesn't look right on any of these devices, you can adjust it. But then again, you have so many screens, so you can never design for everything. So you better make it, fluid and responsive, so that you know it will look okay on every type of screen. Good question. Okay. Okay. So web accessibility. So like I said, it's about universal access to the web. So this is sort of the principle where we're coming from, but it's also the thing that makes the web work. So we need to sort of constantly keep thinking about it, because otherwise we're losing this idea of a universal web that's accessible for all. But again, you can also look at it from an economic perspective. So if you wanna reach your customers, you need to do this, and also from a legal perspective, I guess. I mean, you might get a takeaway that it's simply designed for screen readers, but we've seen that there's actually a lot of different types of users and disabilities and that you will need to think about all of them. So visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive might have completely different but related requirements. I hope that you see that it's very closely related to device independence and that the solutions are very similar, but also the principles behind it are quite similar. And in general, I mean, I've shown a lot of solutions or possible solutions and directions, but it's basically keep it simple, use the standards, use the way that we've been showing you in the first lectures to separate content and markup and layout. If you do that, then you're almost there, right? And then you don't run into these issues that these 21 issues that VU has. Okay, so yeah, so this is a bunch of things that are interesting for you. Some of them are already shown. Some specific Dutch ones, also because again, like I said, there's a legal component to this, and of course the laws are different in every country, so you can have a look there at what government things do. And one thing I want to say, I forgot to put it in the slides, but so in the reader, in the Canvas, you have the reader where you have this article by Smetske, in which they analyze different university libraries, right? And you would think university libraries, they are should be the most accessible websites in the world, right? So it's universal knowledge libraries, so they've been thinking about this all the time. Libraries are always the first to install ramps, right, for wheelchairs. And the results are quite horrible. So and they make a good case saying that, okay, if we don't do it right there, then how can we expect the IBM website to be well designed? Right? So that's a good way of looking into it and how actually this type of research is being propagated. Okay, I think we're just gonna stop today. Are there any questions? And otherwise, I'll let you out with a cool dope rap video. Any questions? No? Okay, then thanks a lot, and we'll see each other in a week.